Welcome to Naughty Notes. Today's topic is the empirical rule, well, or the 68, 95, 99, 7, or the 3 sigma rule. Any of those work for me. And we've got our graph here, right here with our normal distribution, and we've already got some of those standard deviations in there. So they could be out there wider, or maybe the standard deviation smaller. And let's just put this up here. So again, the distance, as we said last time, between there and there. Now, I may have said 1, I really mean to say plus or minus 1 standard deviation, because the standard deviation, of course, is the distance from the mean, either this way or this way. Now, the meaning of this, well, it's really pretty simple. The rule, all it says is that 68% of the values, or 68% of the data, is going to occur between these two marks, between here and here, plus or minus 1 standard deviation. Well, that's the first digit, so that takes us out that far. That's what we've got. But keep it going, and if we make it out plus or minus 2 standard deviations, we're looking at 95% of the data. So let's have a visual on that, see what it looks like. Plus or minus 95% of the data, or sorry, 95% of the data is plus or minus 2 standard deviations. Oh, there you go. And go a little bit farther, and we can see we pick up almost all of it. Honestly, for practical purposes, just about all of it, but we're going to stick with the numbers we've got here. And we're going to say right there, that's going to represent 99.7. So all that's left is 0.3%, and that's going to be split on both sides. All right, now let's make some notes for us, shall we? Okay, you all know that I'd like you to sketch this some way, and so you sketch a curve, whether it looks like this or like this. Maybe I'll spread mine out a little bit like that, and let's put some numbers in here. Since we said 68 was the first number, remember that's plus or minus 1 standard deviation, and the curve is symmetrical. So take that and divide by 2. You've got 34 and 34. That makes sense? Sure. Some folks find it useful to have your notes organized this way. Now, what's the interval between here and here? Well, between plus or minus 2 standard deviations is 95%. Take away the distance, or take away this value, the 68%, and you've got 27%. Divide it by 2 because it's evenly distributed on both sides, and this is roughly what you'd expect, 13.5% in that interval on either side. Well, you see where this is going. Well, how about the next one, the next interval? Let's take 99.7. That's the values between these two. 3 standard deviations either side. Subtract the 95%, which is the distance between the ones I've colored blue. And that's going to give us 4.7%. Chop that in half, and there you go. Well, what do we have left? What's on the outside? The outliers, you might call them. Well, if we had all the data, that's 100%. We take away the 99.7, that gives us 0.3. Now that's split. That's both below and above the 3 standard deviation mark. So I guess you would call that 0.15%. All right. Now let's answer some questions with this and put that in our notes. All right, the surfer questions. Surfers know the wave height follows a normal distribution. Gosh, I hope it does. And average wave height is 9 feet. Wow, it must be on Maui or something. The standard deviation is 2 feet. All right, I made these numbers up, but I hope they're realistic somewhere for you surfers. And let me see, I've already got the mean put on 9, but let me, oops, no, I want the mean on 9. Let me tighten up the standard deviation for 2. Right about, nope, we got to get it just right. Right there. Now, if you can't read those numbers, I know I can't, right here, this is going to represent 9. We're going to add 2, subtract 2. Either way, we're going to find these values. And now we can answer some questions. So let's start with a softball, an easy one. 68% of the time, we'd expect wave height to be, well, plus or minus 1 standard deviation between 7 and 11, right there. Now you could write it like that. Maybe you write it with words. I kind of prefer the latter. All right, easy enough. Now we expect the wave height to be between 5, let me see, that's down here, and 13. What percent of the time? Gosh, another softball question. You know that's plus or minus 2 standard deviations. Look, you can just look right up there. It just about answers itself. And that's going to be 95% of the time. Now, I don't want you to think you can just guess your way through this with these 3 choices, but so let's mix it up a little bit and just make sure you've applied some common sense. What percentage of time can we expect the waves be between 3 and 7? All right, so we're surfers in training. We need enough wave to get on it, but not so much that we're scared. Honestly, I don't think I've paddled in bigger than 7 foot, but that's it's just a math problem for us. Between 3 and 7 feet, right there. Let's see. Now, we could do it if we took notes from the previous, and I guess the previous slide we had up there. You remember that we said, hey, this segment's got to be 13.5%, and that this one is going to be 2.35%. We could just add those 2 up, right? And we'd get 15.85%. Is it really that accurate? Well, let's just stay with what we got here. Suppose we didn't take those notes. We're just looking at these 3 numbers, and we just want to figure it out. Okay, well, we take 100%. We take away plus or minus 1 standard deviation. We take that away from the middle. What we're left with is 32%. All right? Now that 32% means everything greater than 11 feet, everything less than 7 feet. That's 32%. Now we're going to change that up again. And now we're going to get rid of this too. We're going to get rid of anything above 15 feet. In other words, anything outside of 3 standard deviations. So what we're looking at now is everything between 1 and 3 standard deviations. But that's really on both sides. And then we're going to take that and we're going to divide by 2. And of course, we get the exact same value. So 15.85%. Very specific. Now, what are the odds of the wave height exceeding 13 feet? All right, well, that's easy enough. Now, again, we could add these 2 elements together. Maybe we have them in our notes. We could add that number and we could add that number. Or we could just figure it out from the rule. Now, if I have 100% and I take away everything that's between 2 plus or minus 2 standard deviations, well, I mean, plus or minus 2 standard deviations is the 95%. That means everything outside of it's just 5%. I'm going to take that 5% and I'm going to divide by 2. Wow, how about that typo? Well, okay, let's clean that up a little bit. Now that's embarrassing, but I like that one a little better. So again, 2.35 plus 0.15. You could have added these 2 together, or we could have taken 5 and chopped it in half. We got 2.5%, and that makes sense. So that would be the odds of the wave exceeding 13 feet. And then for you real champion surfers, and you got to wait a long time because you only got a 0.15, 15% of 1%, 15 hundredths of 1%. That's pretty thin odds. That's above there. So let's leave Maui behind and let's come back to Anchorage, Alaska, and do some skiing. Yeah. Now, skiers consume an average of 50 grams of protein a day, according to a normal distribution. And standard deviation is 6 grams. I did at least look up and said 50 grams will be all right. Seems like a lot of protein, but some skiers are bigger than others. So we've got this this distribution, and right here I've got the mean centered on 50 grams. But the curve doesn't look right yet because that's a skinny standard deviation. Let me spread it out, spread it out, spread it out. That's passing through 4, passing through 5. Okay, now there you go. That's a standard deviation of 6. So that's a little more like what the curve looks like. And there you go. For all you hungry skiers. Let's see how that works out for all of us. Well, 95% of the skiers will consume. Well, that's with plus or minus 2 standard deviations. So that makes sense. Well, that would be easy. That's the numbers in blue. Now, that's color coding is just random. That's just something I picked to make it easier to talk. Between 38 and 62 grams. Right. Okay, skiers, what percentage consume less than 38 grams a day? So again, we're saying to the left, less than this. So we are talking on the outside. Now we could add up our elements, or we could just do this. Again, everything that's not within these two is 5%. And then, of course, if I take 5% and I chop it in half, that's going to oh, fool me twice. Okay, it's going to give me 2.5%. So there you go. You'd think my editor would have caught that. Unfortunately, I am he. So let's see if we can I hope there's no more mistakes in that. What percentage of skiers consume between 44 and 56? Here's 44. Here's 56. Okay, I've tossed you a softball. Plus or minus 1 standard deviation. And of course, you're going to know that that is going to be 68%. What percentage of skiers consume between 56 and 62 grams of protein? That's between here and here, between. Now, we already had this worked out, and I think you all remember that. When you took your notes, you got that. Oops. But if you had to work it out from the numbers, again, you'd say, well, let me see. Everything within plus or minus 2 standard deviations is 95%. I subtract from it plus or minus 1 standard deviation, 68%. I have 27%, which is evenly split on both sides of the symmetrical curve, and that gives me 13.5%. Well, I hope this helps you out a little bit with your, well, if you're in my class, this should help you out with your quiz. And if you're not in my class, hey, thanks for joining us, and thank you for watching Nani Notes.